I started to back to Texas 4 or 5 years ago to study the mixed delivery system, or what I call a mixed market. What I need to get my PowerPoint to.
Should just continue on down, push it down, Harold.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. Okay. Is it going to be okay? A lot of my work is in early childhood policy, and about 4 or 5 years ago, in part with Susan's help and John's, I started coming out to learn from all of you. I learned early in life that it's hard to really outdo Texans. Part of my family is from Amarillo, or Amarilla, as my people would say, and I learned at a very young age that it's really quite difficult. I do come from California, where we're equally proud and chauvinistic, but I was reminded of this fact. You know, our governor, who is also known as the Terminator, the big story is whether he'll go back into the movies. He's been so successful as a political figure. There's a lot of speculation of whether he can be equally successful as a return actor. And so there's been a lot of discussion of this. But in the midst of all this, I came across the headline a couple weeks ago, Texas governor shoots Wile E. Coyote while jogging. And once again, I was reminded that it's hard to outdo Texans. I do want to pick up on Susan's remarks and really build from a lot of what Bob Pianta said before lunch. He did, I think, very convincingly show, and his colleague Andrew Mashburn has really a brilliant paper out on this, showing that central regulation of preschool quality, relying on crude regulations enforced from afar, do little to lift the competencies of teachers or to invigorate preschool organizations. I do enthusiastically concur with Bob that we've got to rethink how to redesign quality improvement efforts. And again, I think we're learning a lot from everything you all are doing here in Texas. One reason I believe the traditional regulation of quality doesn't work is that centralized rulemaking often fails to recognize the kaleidoscopic diversity of providers and the diversity of organizations that now serve young children in major urban states like California and Texas. So my point today is really to take the discussion up an organizational level and say, well, how do we develop policy options delivered through this vast mixed market of formal centers and home-based settings? How do we deliver policy options that incentivize or encourage these sort of quality improvement efforts that Susan's been talking about or that Bob Pianta's been experimenting with in other states? That is, it's not sufficient to have these models on a small scale. We've got to rethink policy and rethink the organizational methods and incentives through which we encourage these sorts of quality improvement efforts. We've relied, I think, too long on these centralized regulations, such as credentialing levels, class size, ratios. As Susan mentioned, these present the organizational context within which strong teaching and strong social relationships can be built. But if we're moving towards these more inviting and encouraging models of quality improvement, we need to rethink the policy apparatus as well. The second starting point for me is that lifting child development, whether in the pre-literacy or the social-emotional domain, depends on our ability to improve human relationships between caring adults and a young child. And these relationships have to be multifaceted, as Susan and Bob have both addressed earlier today. That is, they need to address kids' emotional support and everyday motivation, as well as organizing classrooms to better advance rich language and pre-literacy skills. And I think the early childhood field, in a way, has sort of been creating a false dichotomy between these two worlds. There's a set of papers out in developmental psychology this week. Education Week has a story up on its website covering this research, which shows, especially for Latino kids, that their social and emotional growth and their motivation and enthusiasm in the classroom, of course, is related to the acceleration of their cognitive growth. And how we encourage teachers to look at this symbiotic relationship and this interaction between the two domains, I think, is a major challenge, rather than seeing these as sort of separate, divisive sort of discussions. Let me just start out by giving you some basic graphs and stats, and as well-informed Texans, none of this is new up front in my talk. But I do think we want to keep our eye on diversity, both the diversity of kids and families and the diversity of organizations that you all have been building over the last few decades. This is just take a look at the yellow bars in the middle. If you're under 35, you can probably read the numbers on the bars. But in places like Houston, 34% of the population is now Latino. San Antonio, I think that says 59%. Austin, here in Austin, 31%. And of course, this is growing. If you look at major urban states in the country, Texas is only second to California in terms of the share of residents who speak a language other than English. It's up over a third here in Texas. We see these numbers all the time, but in a way, it's not quite shaking or getting us to rethink how we recast quality when the kids and the families coming to us differ from the characteristics of our teachers in many cases. The demographic diversity in Texas is matched by the state's organizational diversity. That is, the localized history of childcare and preschooling, as you all know, has led to an equally colorful panoply of early childhood settings, from home-based programs to formal preschools. Some are funded entirely through family fees, others are financed and regulated by public agencies, many are faith-based, and many are not. This slide just tries to show the range of childcare settings that operate here in Texas, at least for those programs that report to state agencies. This graph is a little funky because it's so dominated by subsidized home-based settings. The far bar on the right indicates that there are about 16,000, almost 17,000 home-based programs, family daycare and other home-based programs subsidized by government or not, perhaps financed through fees. Public pre-K, there's about 3,000 organizations, 201,000 kids. Head Start in Texas now, 119 agencies and about 78,000 kids. So we're trying to build a policy structure to improve quality that's sort of founded on these legs of organizational diversity, or what's a vastly wide-ranging mixed market. And the problem is that our regulatory mechanisms, how we think about improving quality, oftentimes comes from centralized, sort of strong state models, even though, as Bob detailed, the centralized regulations are not raising kids' outcomes, and the centralized regulatory apparatus doesn't really speak to this sort of organizational diversity. And that's why I think what you all are doing here in terms of building partnerships, building coalitions across these sectors is very powerful and not always seen in other states. Texas is not alone in this feisty mixed market organization of early childhood programs. Nationwide, families and governments now spend almost $48 billion a year. About half of this comes from parent fees and half comes from public agencies like government. This is a huge enterprise, and if you go to the NAYC meetings and go to where all the play and toy manufacturers display their wares, you know that this is a booming industry. Again, financed half from the public sector and half by families directly.